So Lauren Southern,
Yeah,
yeah. So she and Brittany Pettibone went and interviewed Dugan. I think a lot of these influencers were using Dugan to as clickbait. They thought he's a big name. We could use him to get attention, and they're doing the bit that Russia's more conservative, based in trad, and it's all based off of half truths and lies. Of course, I mean Russia is not this base trad haven. I mean, there's all kinds of alcoholism. The church attendance is low. Abortions are high. It's really PR, is what that is. It's good PR that they use to dupe conservatives, to dupe Christians, right? Um, Christians are, it's very easy for Christians to fall into this crap because they're so desperate for a savior that if Putin comes out and says nice things about Christianity or lights a candle in a church, then they're sold and they will back that side no matter what.
exactly.
Um, and so there's some kind of useful idiot faction. There's also paid people. Tucker Carlson, I mean, I think it's just undoubtedly he's been co-opted. I mean, the guy seems like he's on call. You know, they call him up, hey, come interview Putin, come interview Lavrov, oh, come interview Dugan. I mean, he was shilling their side throughout the entire war from day one, and he seems completely obsessed with discrediting Ukraine and justifying the war.
I think that Tucker Carlson is an asset. Uh, Whether he is aware of it or not is up for debate. But I I'm of the opinion that he is actually well aware of it.
Because he asks them no serious questions. He goes there like a little dog and just sits there and lets them roll off. I mean, with the Dugan interview, he even said, I'm not going to ask you about Russia. I just want to hear you criticize America. And that's it. And that's not journalism. That's not journalism at
No,
all. So this is Dugan says
no.
blacks are less fraudulent than whites. I mean, this is like really slop shit. Like Ukrainians are collective transgenders. So I think Putin dropped the transgender thing in his war speech as well because he knows that's great slop for the conservatives in the West. Glenn Greenwald interviews Dugan and he says the globalists are the real racists. So he's kind of taking that Dinesh D'Souza shit and he's spinning it. Glenn Greenwald went to Russia and says, I came to Russia to combat the US's toxic view on the country. What I think happened with him is that he got famous pushing the Snowden story, and that was his claim to fame. But once that died out of the news cycle, he needed a new bit. And so journalists really are grifters, right? Once one thing loses its play, they have to jump on another thing. And his new thing is just shilling for Russia and combating any negative claims about the country, and that's pretty much what he does now.
Well, remember there's a lot of suspicious aspects to Glenn Greenwald's claim to fame, uh, which was the Edward Snowden case. I mean, Glenn Greenwald was a bit of a figure during the Iraq War. Now, keep in mind, Glenn Greenwald endorsed the Iraq War. I mean, people forget that. I want to know, where were you when the rubber hit the road? I don't want to know where were you like 4 years later or something like that. So Glenn Greenwald was a pornographer and a lawyer, and then he was a sort of go-to civil liberties guy uh, uh, in Washington, and but he endorsed the Iraq War, and then he turned on it and complained about civil liberties and blah, blah, blah. Which I find to be just sort of a kind of, I don't know, a very secondary or tertiary issue. And then even the Edward Snowden. I mean, what do we think of Edward Snowden? I mean, there are a lot of suspicious things. Edward Snowden is living in Russia right now.
Right.
That in itself might lead us to believe something. The Chelsea Manning or Bradley Manning issue. Chelsea Manning, once her sentence was commuted, was actually involved with a lot of alt-right figures. She sort of famously denounced Charlottesville. I remember she had like a big jackboot on, and she was like "Smash the fascist" or whatever. Okay, I haven't seen that before, Chelsea. But she was also hanging out with people who I think are quite suspicious. Um, One of them, who is that journalist? I'm forgetting her name at the moment. Uh, she's kind of famous for having a big rack. She worked
Fairbanks.
at RT. Yes,
Hmm.
exactly. It's funny. I just say one
She's
thing.
she's screwed up. Yeah,
Um,
she's like
a
Sputnik.
literal Russian employee.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And
Yeah.
she's the conduit.
Go
She's the
ahead.
conduit between Posobiec, Bannon, these figures that got pulled into that Dugan orbit as well. I think that there's always some kind of connection there with the Kremlin. And then Julian Assange, of course, operates in that network, and he had a television show on RT, and
Yes.
he outright
Let me go back
refused to
here.
publish um, documents critical of the Russian government. I mean, he wouldn't leak anything that was embarrassing to Russia, which is
Right.
suspicious if he's a whistleblower. You know, he's against government corruption, except when it's the Kremlin. So these people, I
Yeah,
mean,
exactly.
Max Blumenthal's within that scene as well. In that sector, he's shilling massively for the war in Ukraine, even though he's
Yes.
like supposedly an anti-imperialist. I mean, they've all showed themselves to be total frauds. That like George
And they
Galloway.
flipped on a dime. Yeah. They turned Max Blumenthal and company turned on a dime. They started shilling for Assad and Syria the moment Russia went in, basically. So um, yeah, these people, and I think there's a sort of type. And I know this sounds self-serving, but if you're a little, you either need to be a little dumb or very, or have zero scruples. So I don't think Fairbanks is terribly intelligent. I think she can kind of do her job. Greenwald's intelligent but shallow, but I would imagine he has zero scruples just looking at his life story. Lauren Southern, is she really all that intelligent? I think not. The whole tenant situation was a kind of, attack on midwits in many ways, using midwits as assets and giving
IQ
them the right
test, yeah.
talking points. It's kind of an I don't I know this sounds self-serving for me to say. I am well aware of it. But I have an ability to reflect on things. I have an ability to evolve and I have an ability to change. And I'm no one's dancing monkey. And
Mm,
that's not what they want from an asset. And,
for sure, yeah.
Glenn Greenwald, yeah, you're like a brave truth teller. It seems extremely one-sided what he does. It seems very polemical in the sense that I feel like he's a kind of gun for hire and a useful person to associate with an attack on American intelligence that I think characterized the whole Snowden situation.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. And what's amazing about all of this is the blind spots that these different factions who have endorsed this Kremlinite propaganda have. So you have the anti-imperialist left, who massively shill for imperialism when it's done by Russia, right? You got these Hinkle has freaks who
Right.
say that, oh, we're global anti-imperialists, and then the second that Russia does actual colonialism, because that's what this is, it's Russian Lebensraum expansionism to Russify people and take their land, they're all in for it. Same
Yes.
with George Galloway, same with Abby Martin. None of them criticize imperialism and expansionism when it's done by their benefactor. But then on the other side, you have these right wing supporters of Russia who generally would be against something like multiculturalism. But then when Vladimir Putin supports multiculturalism in Russia and says we're a multicultural state and it's the strength of Russia to be multicultural, they have no criticism of that. When Russia dumps Central Asian Muslims into Ukraine, they have no criticism of that. I mean, they're doing like an ethnic style cleansing, of eastern Ukraine and Russifying the
When
region
Russia
with
creates the refugee crisis, you know, I mean,
yeah,
like that, the refugee crisis is largely a result of Russian actions in Syria. Secondly, and even more damningly, the refugee crisis was encouraged by Russia using these refugees as a sort of weapon against the West and other countries and funneling them. So it's
mhm,
just it's just crazy. I mean, you can even think of it as a kind of like problem, you know, offering the both the problem and the solution. You create these refugee problems in Syria, probably, I mean, no doubt, unintentionally, and they had geostrategic goals by going into Syria, but nevertheless, you spark this catastrophe, and then you get in bed with the people who are going to benefit from the backlash. That is these ethno nationalist right wing parties that are all throughout Europe, or the alt right, or just largely mainstream conservatism, MAGA now. The other aspect, and there's been a lot of deep research done on this, is the connection between Israel and Russia. So, one of the talking points of the pro Russia people is that, you know, Zelensky's Jewish and, you know, the Zionists love Israel,
right,
or Ukraine is going to become a new Zion. The Jews are moving to Ukraine. I don't
yeah,
even know what the hell they're saying.
toe
It's
crap.
not like the almost. I mean, there's no. First off, just to be fair here, because I'm fair, there are no doubt many Jewish neocons like David Frum or Bill Kristol who are cold warriors in their bones and they support Ukraine. So you can make a sort of case, but you're ignoring the overwhelming reality, which is that Netanyahu and Putin are partners. Netanyahu campaigned with massive banners of Vladimir Putin in order to reach towards some of these Russian immigrant, quote unquote, Jews who are in the broader Likud coalition. The amount of sharing of technology and even Israel as a conduit to avoid sanctions in order to get uh, tech and materiel to Russia, excuse me, is documented. Um, I, I mean, it goes on and on. It's Russia and it's Israel and Russia